right, so we're going to talk about multiplying decimals. Yesterday, what was our number one rule when we add and subtract decimals?
Line up decimals.
Perfect. So always line up your decimals. Well, with multiplying decimals, we're going to forget that. So most important, I want you to write this down. Do not line up your decimals. Do not line up your decimals. Don't think about them. We're going to actually ignore our decimals until we get to the end of our problem. So like with addition and subtraction, you're lining up your decimals, adding placeholders. We're not having to do any of that with multiplying. No placeholders are needed. Just multiplying like normal. So we're going to have 3 steps we're going to follow. The first, of course, and we're going to make this as simple as possible, you are going to multiply. You're going to pretend like you don't have any decimals. And you're going to multiply just like normal. Okay, once we've multiplied, we've added if it's more than 1 digit, and we've gotten our answer. Anybody remember what from last year might your second step be?
How many numbers there are on the right, you just go down to your answer and count that many numbers.
Perfect. So our second step is going to be to count our decimal places. And that means how many places there are to the right of your decimal point. So however many numbers are to the right of your decimal point in both numbers, okay? And like Olivia just said, we'll talk about, we're going to do an example together in just a second, yeah. So multiplying like normal, then we're going to count our decimals. And then the last thing, we're going to move the decimal in our answer. We're going to move it to the left, the same number. This should be an arrow, sorry. It looks kind of weird. Same number of places. We're going to work through it together, and I'm going to show you exactly what I mean. So the only time we're worried with our decimal is when we get to our answer. All right, I'm going to move this up just a little bit. Are we good so far?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so we're going to look at the example. If you need to get mine in a minute, you can finish copying that top part down too. Our example is going to be 365. What do we call that? What place is that? Thousandths. So 365 thousandths times 1 and 2 what? Tenths. Very good. Okay. So again, our first step, I'm ignoring my decimal places, and I'm going to do what? Multiply. What is 5 times 2?
10.
Carry my 1. 2 times 6?
12.
Plus 1.
13.
Carry my 1. 2 times 3?
6.
Plus 1.
7.
Awesome. Now, what do I need on the second row?
0.
Yes, there's our placeholder. Okay. So 1 times 5 is?
5.
1 times 6? And 1 times 3.
3.
Add those together. See, we're doing just like normal. Now, does it make sense if I'm multiplying 1.2 times something that's less than 1? Would it make sense for my answer to be 4,000? No. So at this point, I know my decimal is missing. Okay, I know that I am not done. So when we said in step number 2 to count the number of decimal places, we're looking to the right of our decimal point, how many places there are on each number. So how many on this number?
3.
Okay, you don't have to put the little circles, but if you do, make sure you are enclosing them in something so you don't think it's part of your problem. How many places after?
1.
Okay, so in my answer, that means I'm going to have how many?
4.
4. So I'm counting up on each number, and then that way when I come down here, I start at the end, and I move it 1, 2, 3, 4 places to the left. Now, in the past, whenever you've done multiplication, let's say 2 times 5, your answer, is it going to be larger or smaller than when you started? Larger. We're used to that. When we multiply, things get bigger, and when we divide, things get smaller. With decimals, it can be a little bit tricky and make you feel like maybe you're not doing it right. But look at your numbers. Did our number get larger or smaller? Smaller. But look, if I'm multiplying 1.2 and I multiply that by 1, what is my answer? No, just look. 1.2 times 1. 1.2. But look what I'm multiplying it by. I'm multiplying it by something less than 1. So if I'm multiplying it by something less than 1, my answer is going to be less than I started out with. Okay? So it's not your typical like, oh, when we multiply, my number gets larger. When I divide, my number gets smaller. Next week when we get to division, when we're dividing, our number may actually get larger. Okay? But with multiplication, because we're multiplying by something less than 1, it is possible for your answer to be smaller than what you started with. Okay? All right? Any other questions so far? Yes?
It's not a question, but you can take off the 0.
You sure can. Absolutely. What we're saying here, we don't have to have the 0. 4,380 10,000ths is the same as 438 thousandths. Yes. So we don't have to have that 0 at the end. Now, we needed it right now to figure out where our decimal was going to go. Let me ask you this other question. What if I'm moving my decimal and I run out of numbers, but I still have to move my decimal? What do I do, Tanner?
You put placeholders.
I do. So let's say this one had 5 places, and I had to move it over 1 more. Then I would put a 0 placeholder in that space. So it would be 0.04380. Okay? So just make sure whenever you're moving your decimal that you're paying attention to how many places you need. All right? That was a short video for today.